Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. So here we are with another episode of Legal Tea. And today's topic is a current trend. So something going on in the current time that is pertinent to my little estate and elder law world. With that introduction, we're actually going to be talking about a young couple named Josh and Maegan Barras, who have taken a front seat in many social media platforms, specifically a platform called TikTok, which we'll get to all of that in a second. But before I get started, I wanted to respectfully mention something. This episode is a very real life case. And it's not like all these Legal Tea episodes are based on imaginary things. They're all real cases, whether celebrities or clients. Why I'm stopping here and saying it on this episode, though, is that these are very real people and their story is really sad all around from many different fronts. So if you've had a cruddy day, I'd consider pausing the episode and maybe picking back up another day. Okay, if you're still with me, here we go. So I'm sure you're wondering what's going on with Josh and Maegan, so let's dive in. According to an article in The Advocate, in November 2018, Josh, who I believe is in his 30s, I'm going to say late 20s or 30s. I should have confirmed that before I started recording, but young nonetheless. Let's call him young. Josh, after an attempted suicide, survived, but suffered from extreme brain damage due to a prolonged absence of oxygen. Subsequently, in June 2019, the judge in the 15th Judicial District Court in Lafayette, Louisiana, granted Maegan, his wife, the request to be his tutor and his mother, Kelly, to be his what's called under tutor. Before I go into any more detail about what's going on, Louisiana's legal system is a little odd. I could say that if I'm in Indiana, right? So Louisiana's legal system is actually Napoleon-based, meaning it has much French influence. So when I say tutor and under tutor, Louisiana refers to tutorship as many other states would refer to as guardianship and conservatorship. So flashback to when we had the episode on Britney Spears, Britney's father is her conservator, right? If Britney Spears' case was in Louisiana, he'd be called her tutor. So we have Maegan as the tutor of Josh and mother Kelly as the under tutor of Josh. According to an online outfit called Exceptional Lives, which is a free service to provide information relating to disability, just kind of heads up on that, a tutor is much like what we would say is a guardian, like I said. So Maegan is that person. Maegan is the decision maker for Josh. However, an under tutor, that is a unique to Louisiana role in that their purpose is to ensure the tutor, Maegan, is operating in Josh's best interest. So Josh's mom, Kelly's role is to make sure Maegan is operating in Josh's best interest. What's strange about all this is as I was researching everything, tutorships are actually reserved for minors. And Josh was not a minor at this point in time by any stretch of the imagination. So I was unable to find if this was a mistake in the court filing or maybe a mistake by an attorney or what. But nonetheless, things got cleaned up in May of 2020, according to that the Advocate article, when Maegan was designated as what's called the curator, which is essentially the tutor or guardian for adults. But Kelly, Josh's mom, was not designated as the undercurator. So what is the reason for all this tutorship, curatorship, guardianship, conservatorship, whatever word you want to use, talk? So Josh is actually in a persistent vegetative state and is on a feeding tube residing in a nursing home. And as the Advocate article perfectly explains this situation, the quote, conflict appears to be between a wife who is ready to let go and a mother who refuses to give up hope. Maegan wishes to move Josh home from the nursing home, take him off of the feeding tube, and let him pass away, while Kelly wants to keep him alive. Hence, that's the scuttlebutt, is because the curator here, Maegan, legally speaking, would have the authority to make decisions on behalf of Josh. In March of this year, in March 2021, Kelly, Josh's mom, through her attorney, filed a motion with the court to restrict Maegan from taking any actions that would end Josh's life. And in response, the judge granted a temporary restraining order, preventing Maegan from accelerating Josh's death, meaning she couldn't take him out of the nursing home, she couldn't remove his feeding tube, etc. And as I sit here today, and I'm recording this in late August of 2021, not much has happened since then, since that temporary restraining order. Hearings keep getting postponed. Maegan's attorney actually withdrew himself, so she had to get a new attorney. Kelly was replacing her attorney for someone else. And then at some point in all this craziness, Josh was actually exposed to COVID-19. So legal process speaking, like I said, not much has transpired since that temporary restraining order. So we're very much still in like the kind of TBD as to what's going to happen. Josh and Maegan's story made such a splash in social media, much due to Maegan highlighting things on the platform called TikTok. So much so that Dr. Phil actually caught wind of it. And in March of 2021, Maegan and Kelly appeared on Dr. Phil virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it was probably for the best that they weren't in the same room. And they went on to explain both of their sides. And if this case interests you to a point of looking into things a little bit more, I highly recommend watching the episode. I think it did a really great job at summarizing what's transpired so far. It puts a face to everyone's names, and they even brought a doctor on to give his medical opinion on Josh. So on this episode, according to the Advocate article, Kelly believes that Maegan is actually exploiting the situation for money. And Kelly said on the episode, quote, just putting this out on social media, she's had a venue where she could raise money. His care is completely paid for through Medicaid. There's really nothing that we need to purchase. End quote. Conversely, Maegan shared on Dr. Phil, it's the brain that was damaged. So basically, if Kelly says that his body is healthy, why let him go? That's what she's saying, Kelly's saying. That just keeps his body there when he's not there mentally. So why is that fair or okay for him when there's no quality of life? That would be for her comfort to see him. That would be us being selfish, end quote. I mentioned at the end of last week's episode that this Josh, Maegan, Kelly saga really reminds me so much of Terri Schiavo. A name some may remember. I honestly bring her up often in client meetings. And most remember Terry's name, but not my younger clients. So let's chat about Terri just for a second. According to Wikipedia, Terri had gone into cardiac arrest at the young age of 26. And as a byproduct of that, and just like Josh, she suffered from massive brain damage due to lack of oxygen to her brain. Terri, again, much like Josh, ended up in a persistent vegetative state. Terri's husband, Michael, wanted Terri's feeding tube removed, and Terri's parents, Robert and Mary Schindler, wanted the feeding tube left in. Michael ended up petitioning the Sixth Circuit Court, in Florida to remove her feeding tube, and Robert and Mary opposed the petition. Terri's case bounced around the legal system for years. I believe it began in the 90s and it ultimately ended in 2005. 14 appeals, 5 district court proceedings, intervention by politicians such as Jeb Bush and President George W. Bush. There were even 4 attempts to be at the U.S. Supreme Court level. I mean, honestly, there were so many motions, petitions, hearings, etc. to name and go into. At one point in the court saga, Terri's feeding tube was actually removed in 2001, but was reinserted days later due to the court proceedings. Then, in 2005, the feeding tube was removed yet again and stayed removed this time, and Terri ended up dying 2 weeks later on March 31st, 2005. You know, when I talk about Terri in client meetings, I often say, we knew what her husband wanted. We know what her parents wanted. We heard from various courts. We heard from various politicians. We heard from news anchors all over the country. But whose opinion were we missing? Terri's. And hers was the most important of all of them. This is exactly why you do planning. You do documents like a healthcare proxy, a living will, advance directives to provide what your wishes are if something happens. That way, people don't have to guess what you wish would have happened. Would Terri have wanted to stay on artificial nutrition and hydration or not? We'll never know. We'll never know what Terri wanted. To me, among the most difficult things about Terri's story and Josh's story is that there really is not any beautifully perfect solution. There's no good happy medium here, right? Like Terri, Josh is either going to be kept alive through his mom's advocacy or pass away through his wife's advocacy. And this whole end of life, life prolonging, but is it not life prolonging topic is one that comes with opinions from so many. And of course, there's even organizations that support both sides. Like, for example, according to the Advocate article, Josh's mom, Kelly, was put in touch with a foundation called the Life Legal Defense Foundation. And she was put in touch with that foundation by the Terri Schiavo Life and Hope Network. And little research tidbit I found is that the Life Legal Defense Foundation is actually the one that's reportedly paying for Kelly's attorneys to fight for Josh to be kept alive. The CEO of the Life Legal Defense Foundation, Alexandra Snyder, shared in regards to Josh's situation, quote, "I have to say this case is very, very much like the Terri Schiavo case and other cases we've handled. And I don't know what it is, but in most of these cases, it's the spouse who wants to kill the patient and the family, either the parents or siblings or both, who want to keep the patient alive," end quote. Those are pretty strong words. Kill the patient? Is it an accurate depiction of the situation? Or not? Ugh. Stories like Josh Barras and Terri Schiavo are why I encourage people to hashtag do your estate plan. A living will, a healthcare proxy, advance directives, they are not fun to talk about, but I promise they're relatively easy to put together. And if you put them together, then you don't end up like Josh or Terri, because your wishes are on paper. Okay, so enough of that. So next week's topic, we're back to estate planning of the rich and famous. Celebrity estate planning mishaps, misfortunes, and mistakes. And during next episode, we're going to talk about one of the best musicians. If you remember from the very beginning of Legal Tea, we kicked things off with Prince. Well, next week's episode is going to be on someone equally as awesome, Michael Jackson. The old MJ actually did some estate planning, guys. I'm so proud of him. He did some solid estate planning, actually, but he made a common mistake many people make when doing things that are called living trusts. And we'll get into that next week. So we'll talk about that next Tuesday, Legal Tea listeners. Talk to you then. Take care.